What is the chief end of man? To get rich. In what way? Dishonestly if we can, honestly if we must.
The Gilded Age, a term coined by Mark Twain in his book The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today, is often considered a time of both industrial advancements and political corruption. The definition of gilded means covered in gold or having a pleasing and showy appearance to conceal something of a lower quality. Both apply to this era. The seeming wealth and prosperity of America during the late 1870s to the late 1910s covered up the corruption that had heavily seeped into every level of society. Influential and wealthy companies caused political corruption on all levels during the Gilded Age through grafts, bribery, and rigged elections. Many of these forms of corruption can be found in today's politics and have been on the basis for many of the acts preventing certain types of corruption. Some of these businessmen were people like William M. Tweed, George Plunkett, Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, Henry Frick, George Pullman, and J.P. Morgan. Grafts are when a person uses political influence or power for personal gain. A tool of the graft were kickbacks. Kickbacks were when someone in power would recommend a contractor and ask for a higher price in exchange for some profit and part loyalty. This was common in the Tweed Ring. Bribes and rigged elections were sometimes mixed. Businessmen bribed political officials excessively at both the local and national levels. Politicians took bribes from business owners to pass a law against laborers or to turn a blind eye on the inhumane actions of the business owners. Political machines, political organizations, were an authoritative boss or a small group of commands that support. Political machines, political organizations, where an authoritative boss or small group commands the support of businesses and supporters, turned elections into an example of fraud. Many people bought the votes of people and paid money to have more than one vote. Voting laws restricted who could vote or who were on the ballot. The morning of elections, judges were appointed based on who was in the lead. These indiscretions paved the road for today's voting regulations. The most infamous scandal of the Gilded Age, in which all of these three fundamental types of corruption made an appearance, was the Tweed Ring in the late 1800s.
In the 1800s, three major political parties were vying for power. These three parties were the Republican Party and the two Democratic machines, Tammany Hall and County Democracy. Of these three, the most famous has to be Tammany Hall. Led by William M. Boss Tweed, the Tammany or Tweed Ring was notorious for rigging elections and adding unnecessary costs to things to gain money. Made up of true criminals, the Tweed Ring was estimated to have taken $75 to $200 million from the city of New York in the span of 6 years, from 1865 to 1871. However, this was not their only scandal.
The Tweed Ring was mixed between the mayor's office, the Democratic Party, and the social club organization, the Society of St. Tammany. William Marsh Tweed became the chairman of the New York Country Democratic Party and the leader of Tammany Club in 1860. Tweed stayed in control of these positions for almost 70 years. In total, the office was held by anti-machine reformers for 10 of these 70 years. In order to understand the success of Tammany Hall's control over city politics, it would be wise to look at George Plunkett.
Thomas Durant, the leader of Credit Mobilier, and the Union Pacific's executive subcontracted railroad work to actual construction crews. He used inflated estimates in order to ensure a significant process. This is an example of grafts. Congressman Oakes Ames and brother Oliver Ames fought with Durant on the issue of Credit Mobilier, ending in Durant's displacement as the head of Credit Mobilier. By October of 1867, the two brothers reinstated Durant in exchange for endorsement of an Ames construction contract that would send a large portion of the significant profit into their pockets. Afterward, legislators contacted Ames in order to buy stock from the company. They too received large sums of money. During the election of 1872, the scandal was brought to the public's eyes. During the lawsuit against Credit Mobilier, the testimony provided a list of Oaks Ames stock contracts.
The secret accounts were composed of several different city projects exposing corruption among the city officials. The most prominent case was that of the construction of the New York City courthouse. This is a prime example of where William M. Tweed received most of his funds, from bribes and kickbacks that he demanded in exchange for city contracts. Building of the courthouse began in 1861 on the site of former Alms House. Officially, New York City spent nearly $13 million, $178 million in today's money, for a building that should have cost far less. The cost of construction was nearly twice the amount of money it took to purchase Alaska in 1867. For 1 month's labor on the courthouse, a carpenter was paid $367,151, or $4.9 million today, on a job that contained little woodwork. A furniture contractor received $179,729, $2.5 million today, for making only 3 tables and 40 chairs. A plasterer received $133,187, or $1.82 million, for only 2 days of work. When a committee took on the task of finding out why it was taking so long to build the courthouse, the committee spent $7,718, or $105,000, to print the report. The printing company they printed it from was owned by Tweed. By the time the courthouse was finally finished in 1880, Tweed had died 2 years earlier in prison. Tweed's imprisonment was largely due to a newspaper article written in the New York Times called The Secret Account. Businessmen were not the only perpetrators of political corruption. The Grant administration was very famous for a long series of scandals. These scandals include the Indian Ring, the Black Friday scandal, and the Credit Mobilier scandal, and the Whiskey Ring. When the Union Pacific Railroad was given permission to make a transcontinental railroad funded by the federal government, a group of officers and directors from the company formed a plan to make an immediate profit. This plan birthed the company Credit Mobilier, controlled by the same people in the Grand Pacific Railroad. Credit Mobilier was a company that would be in charge of constructing the railroad. Essentially, they were paying themselves to build the railroad.
Thomas Durant, and the leader of Credit Mobilier and the Union Pacific's executive, subcontracted railroad work to actual construction crews. He used inflated estimates in order to ensure a significant profit. This is an example of grafts. Congressman Oaks Ames and brother Oliver Ames fought with Durant on the issue of Credit Mobilier, ending in Durant's displacement as head of Credit Mobilier. By the October of 1867, the two brothers reinstated Durant in exchange for endorsement of an Ames construction contract that would send a large portion of the significant profit straight into their pockets. Afterward, legislators contacted Ames in order to buy stock from the company. They, too, received large sums of money. During the election of 1872, the scandal was brought to the public's eyes. During the lawsuit against Credit Mobilier, the testimony provided a list of Oak Ames stock contacts. Mistaken for a list of stock recipients, it implied that Vice President Schuyler Colfax, Speaker of the House James G. Blaine, future President James Garfield, and 10 others were involved. Blaine had turned down the stock offer and so requested that Congress investigate. In this investigation, Ames insisted that nothing illegal had occurred, and so produced a ledger book. It cleared vice presidential nominees Henry Wilson and Blaine, but Colfax and 13 other legislators were incriminated. In the end, only Ames and James Brooke, the sole Democrat, were punished.
The many political machines that destroyed a city through political corruption in forms of grafts, bribes, and rigged elections also created benefits for the same city. Many political machines professionalized urban police forces and made the first housing regulations. The political bosses served as the immigrants' welfare needs and offered food, jobs, and clothing to new immigrants and the poor. They also served as a ladder of social mobility. This means they served as a ladder for ethnic groups to rise in a society where they were blocked out by other means. By the beginning of the 20th century, urban reformers redeemed the cities and destroyed by political machines through beautification campaigns, increased in city services, city planning, and rationalization of the city's government.